Um, that's actually the end of the presentation part. So now we can just kind of talk if we have questions or any other
Awesome.
comments about anything, just spitball here.
I do have a question for you, Stuart. How do you, I mean, you've been talking about percentages and stuff like that. So it sounds like you take a lot of stats. What? Yep. So who takes the stats for you if you don't have a lot of assistant coaches? Because we don't have a lot of assistant coaches either, or maybe you do. And then do you, like, how do you use your stats? Do you use stats from practice for playing time? How do you use stats? Because for me, I'm not as stat driven, and I always like to hear other perspective on it.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So in previous years, this is the first year I did it differently, but in previous years, I record all the matches and I would go back and do stats myself. This year, I outsourced the stats to this platform. It's kind of like Huddle, but it's called Quick Cut, I think. And you upload your video, and I think I pay $17 a match for someone to stat for me. And I get it within 24 hours. So that's how I do it this year. So yeah, $17 a match. I think it's probably ends up being a couple $100 a season. But for me, I have two little kids. I just don't have time to sit at a computer anymore and stat matches. That's the main reason I did it, because 1-year-old and a 4-year-old. Gotta kind of spend time with my family. So that's how I do it, and I did use stats actually a lot more this season. With hitters, a lot of it was hitting percentages for the whole team, serve, receive, and serving percentages, side out percentages, things like that. One of the stats that was really interesting for my team, it helped me design some practices and some drills and things, is that any set where we had 14 or fewer errors, we won those matches, like 99% of the time. It was very rare for us to lose a match if we had 14 or fewer errors. And any set where we had 17 or more errors, we generally lost. And in between 14 and 17, it could go either way. So one of the things I did was I designed a serving game, I guess, where, 2 lines. We're going to serve. I start off easy. If it's just in, you get a point. If it's out, the other team gets a point. And it's basically you get 25 points before the other team gets 14 points. And they failed a lot in the beginning. But I always ask them, I'll say, well, what happened? Why do you think that you only got 18 points before they got 14? A lot of times, there's a lot of similar answers. We weren't focused. We were rushed. I'm like, you get 8 seconds to serve. Take your time. This is not I have all day. We have 2 hours to practice. I'll do this the whole practice if we need to. But take your time. No one's rushing you here. And they always did a little bit better. And then as the season progressed, made it a little bit harder. You have to hit zones 1 and 5. If it's in zones 1 and 5, you get a point. If it's in the court but not in zones 1 and 5, it's kind of a wash. If it's out or in the net, the other team gets a point. So a little bit tougher as season 1 went on. But it really gave them something to focus on. Now, we don't focus on mistakes and errors. It was just more of a perspective thing. Be intentional, be focused in everything that you're doing with a purpose, on purpose. That was kind of the whole point of that. It's not, stop making errors. It's like, yes, I do want you to minimize your errors, but I don't want you to focus on the errors. It's about take your time, be focused, do things on purpose and with a purpose. And I feel like it worked really well because I did it often. It wasn't just a one-time thing. Maybe every third or fourth practice, I would throw that in there. So that's one of the ways I use stats. Go ahead.
I don't have time to do stats. I can't concentrate. I'm all over the place when we're at games. Nor do I have, we're a small club. We're a new club. We don't have the things to record games either. So we did a coaching clinic with some coaches from Hawaii, and they do a plus minus on a whiteboard. So I'm very interested to kind of implement that into our practices. So plus minus errors and mistakes just like, because kids forget, oh, I had this awesome kill, but in the same drill or rally or whatever you were doing, you had 4 errors. So not necessarily focusing on that error, but like refocusing their mind, like, yes, you did this awesome thing, but you also didn't help us in this way. So I'm really looking forward to implementing that. I do get an assistant coach this year, so I'm hoping to do a little bit of that. But I really just kind of focus on serve receive more than anything, because we can't do anything else without serve receive.
Yeah, it is tough to take stats during matches. I can't do it. I'm too into the match. And I've only had one assistant coach who was very analytical driven. She had her iPad with the app where you just do the stats, and she was able to keep track of everything in live time. I'm like, that's incredible. But not everyone's like that. So like with my last assistant coach I had for the last 2 seasons, I'm like, just focus on these 3 things, whatever it is. So just pick a couple things to focus on. Serving, it could be free balls, you know. What's that? It looks like you're talking, but I'm not hearing anything. I'm not sure. Technology.
Noemi, are you there? Oh. Yeah, because I was like you. I would go back, watch the games, like take the stats, then, put my practice plans around them. And I have I really just keep track now of serving errors, serve receive errors. You know what I mean? Like serve receive, and and kills for the most part, kill attempts, obviously, like in kill percentage for the most part. Now I'm going to have to probably keep track of setters this year, because I need to develop setters, and I've got to find ways to do that, which means I'm going to have to take stats on them so I know where we're falling short. Because right now I don't know, but I know I'm going to have to develop them. Oh, I think every program needs setters. Like, I told my freshman coach this year, I'm like, we're running a 6-3 and we're going to have 5 to 10 setters on your team. I was like, it's going to happen.
Awesome. Everyone's a setter.
Everyone is a setter. I'm like, we may even just run a 6-6. Setter comes from zone 1. We may even just do that so that everyone is developing all of those skills and comfortable on the court. Because at this point, that's what we need.
I like that. For AAUs this year, I had to develop setters. I didn't have setters. I had 5 or 6 DSs.
Oh, of course.
And no setters. So fortunately, I had 2 girls step up. But I really only ended up needing one of them, and she played all the way around every single set, and she was okay with it. So,
all right,
it worked.
Those are the kids that you want to keep.
Yeah, she's awesome. I'm sad I can't coach her next year.
Oh,
but she was also on my so I didn't get to keep my regular season team for AAUs. I only got to keep maybe 4 or 5 of them. Don't let me laugh. Yeah. So, she was awesome. So, yeah.
Yeah. I know there are some of the girls that I really miss. Like some of them, like one of them's like a second daughter or third daughter to me, second oldest, I should say. Like she's like a third daughter to me. She's amazing. She's here tonight actually with my daughter. They're having a sleepover because they're playing sand doubles tomorrow. But yeah, so I don't know. I guess I have another question for you. So as far as like, do you have during your tryouts, what are the key elements that you look for in your athletes? Because I have tryouts coming up for my varsity team and JV freshmen, and then also club comes up, and we do tryouts in October here for the Badger region, so for the middle schoolers. And I'm trying to collaborate with as many coaches as possible to see like what their perspective is on the most important things that they want to see in an athlete on their team, high level teams, development teams, things like that.
Yeah, that's a good question. I always want the most skilled players, but I want to see them perform every skill. whether they're going to be playing, whether it might be a middle who ends up not passing ever, but I still want to see how they pass. But really, after the first hour of trials, I just want to see them play. That's really
Me too.
where I learn about them. And I remember this
Yeah.
was 3 years ago. I actually had a difficult time picking a setter because they're all so good. It never happens that way. But I remember it came down to the last 5 minutes. I had one setter on this side of the court, and I coached her the previous year. And then the other setter on this side of the court who was brand new to the club. They were both equally skilled, but this one ran the court better. And I was like, I'm going to have to go with her. Like, you might get there. I could train you to be that way, but she's already there. And
Right.
And I'm looking at everyone else on the court who I've already picked. The team needs her. So watching them play makes a big difference.
I think so too. I have so many coaches, and nothing against their process and how they do this, right? Everyone has their own, their own people, their own strengths they develop, all of those things, right? But like, I'm like, and I even tell my girls, because all of my girls are like, Coach, these are the most fun contact days we've ever had, where you're not just drilling us, you're not just, and I'm like, cool, thanks. Like, I appreciate that, because that's what this is supposed to be. But I also put them through some pretty crazy things, right? I made my upperclassmen coach my freshmen and my sophomores through transition and how, you know what I mean? Like, and then I made them like, they played a tournament against each other. Like, they were essentially the coaching team, and they taught them transition. And then they coached in a tournament against all 4 teams. And then, the winners got to pick what the losers had to do. And it was 5-star jumps, whatever. So, I'm always like, and I am so like, I just want to see how you guys interact with everybody. Like, I want to see what your leadership skills look like. I want to see what the chemistry looks like on the court. You know what I mean? I want to see all of those things from you, like all of those, what we call the intangibles, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like all those soft skills, all of the things. And I haven't met another coach yet that has the same perspective except for you, where it's like, I just want to see you on the court. I want to see you play.
Yeah.
I want to see all those things for you.
Yeah, halfway through the trials, I already have my top 20. I just want to see them play. But I also do a lot of pre-vetting and recruiting.
I don't do a lot of that.
And this year's a little bit different because I'm at a new club. So previously, I'm like I said, regional team, not national. I don't get elite athletes, nothing like that. So previously, a lot of the players that I don't get, they want that travel experience. They like me. Most of them already know me. I have reputation, whatever. I've coached them in a clinic or something like that. I definitely go to the tryout prep clinics, and I'm in their ear. But they want that travel experience. This year, new club, regional teams get 2 out-of-town tournaments and get to play in the qualifier.
Cool.
So I'm thinking I'll be able to pull. My director might not like it, but I might be able to pull some players who might be like, oh, it's either a threes team or it's Coach Stewart's team. I won't be able to pull like a ones player or anything like that, but like a threes team player, if I think they're going to do better on my team, but yeah, you're going to have more fun on my team. You'll have the same exact experience. You'll get the same number of tournaments. You'll get playing a qualifier. You'll be on a better team. They'll be like, okay, sure. Yeah. This year, that's what I'm hoping for. But I go to all kinds of high school matches. I tell my players from previous years, tell me who your best freshmen are, and introduce me. So because they know my philosophy, they know my values, they know my mission statement. They know, like, they kind of protect me. They're like, oh, she won't be good for your team. She's not coachable. I'm like, thank you. Like, they're looking out for me, and I love it. It's adorable. So
I love those kids. I love them.
Yeah, so that's one of the benefits to getting player buy-in is they will protect you in that kind of way. Like, you don't want to coach this person. They're lazy. Oh, thank you for letting me know. They're a drama queen. I'm like, oh, okay, really? Thank you. Because that actually happened at last year's tryouts. There was this one girl, very skilled DS, but I heard from multiple coaches like, oh, you don't want her on your team. She's good, but I'm like, oh, well, thank you for letting me know.
And these players don't understand that we talk. Like, we all talk to each other about that stuff. Like, it's a big deal for us.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very big deal. Yeah. I mean, I guess so. One last question. sorry, I'm probably keeping you, but but one last question. So being a male coach, do you see the differences? And I know you don't have any female perspective because you're not a female, but
Yeah.
if you've had a female like assistants and whatnot, do you see the differences in the way parents treat you compared to the way they treat female coaches?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Unfortunately, absolutely.
Okay. Because I always like to ask that question, even though it's a little bit sensitive, only because I think I've been thinking in the last few years, am I just crazy? Like, is it actually a thing that's getting worse?
Yeah. Fortunately, I do build up my assistant coaches. I'm like, they're just as awesome as I am. If you think I'm awesome, they're better. She actually played. She played in college. She knows more than me about the sport. You should like her more. So I do try to be like, hey, my assistant coach, I handpicked my assistant coach this year. Whatever, blah, 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 blah. She's awesome. So I try to build them up. They're not just an assistant, like,
Yeah.
we're in this together. She understands my core values, my mission statement. She's going to push your kids just as much. But it also depends. I've known some female coaches, they're very much driven and passionate. And I feel like those that I'm thinking of, they command respect. I don't really know how to put it. It's just, that's just what I sense. Because I'll ask parents, hey, your daughter played for me last year. Now she's playing for this coach. How do you feel? Do you like the coach? And they'll just, whatever they say. Yeah, we love her. But I feel like there's definitely, I feel like I'm treated differently for sure.
Yeah. Thank you for answering that, because I know it's a weird, sensitive question. It's been something that's been on my mind and I've really just expressed it professionally in the last few months, because it's like and what sparked it, and I'll tell you before we leave really quick, is I had parents on my team that were basketball coaches, men basketball coaches, that have almost as much experience, or maybe a little bit more coaching experience than I do, but just really like 10 plus years experience, right? And they would rub it in my face that I'm making these decisions on the team and they have so much more experience, I should be doing it this way.
Lord.
And I'm like, so are you discrediting the experience that I have? Like, and it's really been like awful. And maybe it's even just the region that I'm in as well. It could be, and I just kind of think, well, maybe it's the region I'm in because I'm surrounded by fairly decent athletes out here. Or is it across the board? So I like to ask people from everywhere.
I've heard from a few different coaches, and I don't know if they're serious or they're just joking. Some of them were probably joking. I feel like one of them was serious. He's like, when something comes up like that, he just hands them the clipboard, like, here, you make the practice plan. You come run practice. I'll let you do it. You come run practice. You create the practice plan. Show me how it's done. And they're like, oh, no. I just want to complain. It's like, oh, well, that's what I thought. Coaches coach, players play, parents support and cheer.
Right.
But it's always interesting that players treat the assistant coach way different than the parents do. Players love the assistant coach. That's like the good cop, bad cop thing. Assistant coach is the good cop. And I'm okay with. I'm absolutely okay with that. I don't mind being the bad cop. But players always love the assistant coach, and I'm okay with that. And I think if the players love any coach, the parents soften up a little bit. But
yeah, that's true. But then you can always tell how the parents feel about you by how the player treats you as well.
For
that
sure.
all comes too. I'm like, oh yeah, there's that big elephant in the room.
Yeah,
but
for sure.
Well, I'll let you get back to your family. I know it's late by you. Thank you so much for your time tonight. It was it was great to be a part of this. Thank you. If you do it again, let me know. I'd love to be a part of it again to hear other coaches' perspectives and things as well.
Yeah, my friend, because this is all kind of new to me. My friend's like, we do marketing together. We don't work together, but we're just good friends, and he knows a lot of highbrow marketers. He's like, this guy says to do a webinar 5 times. I'm like, 5 times? He said, do it 5 times to perfect it. I do plan on doing more because there's so many different parts, like how to build leaders. How you define winning in your gym, because you can define winning all different kinds of ways, and it depends on what level you coach. You can define winning by your coaching philosophy. Did I fulfill my coaching philosophy? You can define winning by your team's win percentage. You can define winning by how many championships you won. But what's interesting is Russ Rose, one of the greatest NCAA coaches, his 43 seasons he coached, his win percentage was 85.3%. Insane. But what's interesting is 43 seasons, only 7 national championships. He had an 85% win percentage, only 7 national championships. So win percentage and championships, there's not a direct correlation, clearly.
Right.
So, how are we defining winning? How are we measuring success in our programs? It shouldn't just be championships. It shouldn't just be win percentage. It shouldn't just be your coaching philosophy. It's all of it, But every coach needs to kind of define what's important to them, because there are some programs they're just all about win, whatever.
Right.
they tend to alienate a lot of people with that philosophy, but
yeah,
whatever.
And those, I know, I'm all about the community. Let's build the community of volleyball. It's about the sport and the athlete. It's not about me and the winning percentage. I mean, the win is fun. Believe me, we're going to strive for it, but.
I got one more.
Yeah. And y'all are also welcome to email me after this if you have, if you're, like you said, you're processing your thoughts and something comes to your mind later. More than welcome to email me later.
So something that I thought was interesting from your presentation, and I'm not asking in a destructive way, it's just genuinely curious about it. So something that I've kind of developed is I call them primary and secondary goals.
Mm-hmm.
So primary goals to me are things that we control 100% of the time, no matter what the situation, right? So we're talking about, your effort, how you respect your peers, whether it's your teammates, your coach, your opponents, how you're dealing with your adversity, mentally, things you're doing, the things that no matter, how good or bad you play that day, you could walk off the court, and no matter who you played against, winning or losing, you should have control over that, right? And then you got your secondary goals, which I think, are a little more common as a motivator,
mm-hmm.
which are results based. To your point, like you said, you've got players that have the goal of making their varsity team as a sophomore, making certain teams playing in college, et cetera, right? But the reality is you know as well as I do, there are some players that have gifts where if they want to play in college, even without necessarily putting a lot of work into the sport, they're going to have options. And you have other kids that might not naturally apply to the sport, and they might play at a very competitive school. With some of the things you brought up, do you approach it differently if two kids come to you with the same goal and deep down okay, this kid is a sophomore, absolutely can make it as a senior with right? How do you kind of manage expectations when some of those goals, no matter how hard the kid works, they may not truly have full, the supply doesn't always meet the demand. How do you find a balance, and maybe if you want to use that as motivation without, making that the bar, so that kids, again, there are kids that may not make varsity as a sophomore, but they couldn't have done more with the time they had with where they started. And being frank, there are some kids, some of the most gifted kids I've ever coached, unfortunately they knew it at a young age. They were a big fish in a smaller pond. And unfortunately, I think sometimes that can be a detriment if they're not used to I can give half my effort and get twice the result. Mm-hmm. So how do you find that you manage that in your program?
Yeah, that's a great question. First, let me touch back real quick about the controllables. I simplified it, and I used an acronym more to help me remember. BEAT, beat the negative mindset. We control our behavior, our effort, our attitude, and our thoughts. So I kind of communicate that all throughout the season. So that's very important. When we finish a tournament, did you have fun? Were you a good teammate, and did you learn something? Those are kind of the questions I ask a lot of times, especially if they lost or something like that. I kind of redirect it a little bit. Did you have fun? Did you learn something? They're going to be a little upset at first, even if they knew there was no chance of them winning the championship. They don't like losing. They don't want to lose. But then to part two, there's players every year that, yeah, I know you're not going to make varsity as a sophomore. You're just not there. But I think it's kind of having the conversations around, trust the process. let's be excellent in the little things. They make a big difference. So I still want to make them as competitive as possible, whatever that looks like. There's some schools around here that have an insane varsity program. It's only juniors and seniors. You're never going to get a freshman and sophomore in there. It's just crazy the talent that they have. So, okay, you're a sophomore. Let's focus on something else. Let's find other goals. Like for some of my players this year, it's like, well, let's focus on improving your hitting percentage. Beginning of the season, your hitting percentage is 5. Middle of the season, let's aim for 15. End of the season, let's aim for 30. That's a big accomplishment. That might not get them to varsity, but they did a really good job of just improving little by little over each one. Does that kind of answer your question of how I redirect that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and like you said, you have to treat each player differently. Of course, some of them have the same goal and just aren't there. Of course, you never talk about that as a group. It's always individual.
Do you ever worry about them talking outside of, and maybe someone made that goal and you didn't? Like, do you ever worry about, like, if you allow someone to kind of make that their goal, and being honest, you're telling someone else not to make that goal, but like, what if they cross paths and talk about that?
I don't know that I'd ever directly say, "Oh, that's not a good goal for you." I don't know. I just had an example come to my mind. I lost it. But I think when someone comes to me and they have a big goal, because this happened toward the end of my season, one of my players said, "Oh, I want to play in college now." It's like, oh, when did this decision happen? It's great. And then that kind of changed my whole perspective on how I need to prep her, because she's not there yet. And I was honest. I'm like, you got a lot of work to do. Like, you're not going to be taller than 5'8", which is fine. Is D3 okay? But she's like, I want to play at, UGA. I'm like, real talk, real quick. Hold on. You're probably not going to play at UGA. Maybe it's a great goal. But here's some things you need to focus on. You need to do some jump training. You need to strengthen your core. You need to be working out. You need to be going to clinics. You need to be doing one-on-ones, whatever it is. You need to be working a lot harder than you're working right now. So I try to be as transparent as possible without hurting their feelings or anything, and discouraging from going for the goal. It's more like a real talk moment.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Danielle, Jessica, y'all got anything?
Yeah, this is Jessica. I don't. I am a brand new coach
All
to this high school, and your kind of message just came across right in the greatest time, because when I came onto this team, there's a lot of things that I am seeing right out the gate before we even work on technique that we need to change with our culture. And a lot of that is driven by the upperclassmen. So we just had tryouts this week, and I told them next week that we're going to have kind of like a 3-day camp where we'll go from like 8 in the morning till 3 in the afternoon. And a lot of that work is going to be on our culture. So this gives me a good place to start. And I think some of our values are similar to yours, or like mine is similar to yours. One of mine, especially even for teaching and for athletics, is don't be rude and don't be lazy. So they kind of there's a couple of them that are just natural leaders that have started taking that on, and they're like, don't be lazy, don't be lazy. I don't have anybody rude yet, so that's amazing. But so this gives me a starting point and gives me some ideas on some things to work through next week with them, and hopefully get some buy-in and just kind of change that culture and that commitment level. Because we have a lot of girls that were like, oh, I'm going on vacation because we don't have school that starts until the last couple days of the month. And I was like, you're kidding me, right? This is big girl ball. This isn't, middle school or travel where you can just like sit here and say, yeah, I'm not going to come. So I think we're going to have that communication next week, and kind of figure out where everybody sits, and is this something just to pass the time, or do we want to win games?
Yeah, that's right. That's good. That's exciting that you get to take on a new program here, and it's a little tough sometimes coming into a program, especially you don't know what the culture was, or the culture is a little bit different than what you're aiming for. High school has an advantage in the sense that you get 4 years to build a culture kind of thing, and then it kind of, it carries itself. In club, I get a new team every year, so it's a little bit different. But I think you're in the right direction that, taking your upperclassmen, taking your natural leaders, bringing them aside, like, hey, get the buy-in from them first, and then communicate to everything. Because once you start communicating to everyone, the upperclassmen are like, yep, this is us. This is who we are. This is our culture. They can start having the conversation. Like, I love building leaders. That's a whole nother section I didn't get to in this. It's about building leaders, empowering my team captains. My team captains this year were phenomenal. And one of them was very, very shy. And she did a phenomenal job. I just your team, your huddle, go for it. And I don't know what they said in the huddle, but apparently it worked. They had whatever they said, it worked. They were highly motivated after those captains came out. So you're definitely taking the right approach, starting with the upperclassmen, start with the captains if you have captains yet. But, I meet with my captains at least once a month just to kind of check in, like, hey, what are y'all seeing? Is there anything happening that I need to address? Things like that. A great book I would recommend, talk about captains a little bit. I don't know if you're familiar with the book. His name's Dan. What's his last name? Dan Blank. Daniel Blank. He was a soccer coach at Embry-Riddle. He has 2 books. Well, he has several books, but 2 that I've read. One is called Everything Your Coach Never Told You Because You're a Girl, which talks about really girls are more competitive than a lot of coaches treat them. That's really kind of the message of the book. And then the other one is really good is In My Tribe. I think I've read both books about 2 or 3 times already. In My Tribe is a little bit more about culture and empowering team captains. So that's a really good book. He does a great job at communicating how to build a competitive culture, especially. I've taken a couple things from his book. I tried something new this year in his book. He calls it the Points League. In the Points League, everyone can earn points throughout the season, but they're not based on skill. They're based on the controllables: behavior, effort, attitude, and thoughts. You don't get points for doing what you're supposed to do. You get points for going above and beyond. And in the middle of practice, at the end of practice, me and my assistant coach is able to give points. You get 5 points for this. I'm calling them out. I bring them together. I say, hey, Elena got 5 points because she did this, because I want them to see. But when you're doing something like the Points League, it has to be consistent. It has to be at every single practice. If you drop off for a couple practices, they kind of forget all about it, and then you try to bring them back, and they're like, oh. And I tied a little prize to it. In my club, when we had master coaching classes, we had a gold ball, and a team could win the gold ball for just crushing it at that practice, where they're just giving their best effort, trying new things. The team each week could win a gold ball. So I decided for the Points League, the winner of the Points League, they get their very own gold ball. So it's the first year I got to do this. It was really cool, very well received. I got to present it, write a little something about the player who earned it and why she earned it, that sort of thing. So it was a little something different. It helped kind of build a little bit of competitive culture. Another thing I do to build competitive culture is I tell my teams, because my teams like to be competitive. They know they're not a national level team, but they want to compete. Like, we'll scrimmage against the ones team and be pretty close. So I tell them everything's a competition. Everything's a competition. Your warm-ups are a competition. Who can be first in warm-ups? If you're doing touch 4, who's going to be first? Or sometimes we're warming up with another team. Let's be better than they are at warm-ups. Let's be in sync, because if we're in sync, that just looks incredible. And like we're winning warm-ups, essentially, if you can win warm-ups. But making your practices competitive, designing drills and games to intentionally be competitive. When you start scrimmaging other teams, pick out a little something. Here's how we're going to be competitive, whatever that looks like for your team. So just having the verbiage of competition, if your desire is to be a competitive team.
Awesome. Thank you.
Because I like to be competitive too. I had to tone it back a little bit because I'm a regional team, not a national level team. And there's some players that I do get that are just there for fun. It's half the cost as travel, and it's less commitment. So I'm just here for fun. I like volleyball, which is great. I'm not going to discourage that. So I have to kind of balance that a little bit.
How do you define competitiveness?
Honestly, I think it kind of depends on each team that I get. Each team's a little bit different. I kind of have to redefine it. I know what I want. I want my team to hustle for every ball. I want them to, go all out the entire practice. I tell them we only get 2 hours. Like, I know we all got stuff going on in our lives. I got stuff going on in my lives. When you're in this gym, it's 100% volleyball. We're going to be focused. We're going to go hard. And I show them examples. Like, if I see someone who's, being competitive in practice, I say, hey, Maddie over here is crushing it. This is what I want to see. This is what competitive looks like right here. That sort of thing. So I just reinforcing the positive, what I want to see.
So just because I find it interesting if you feel like you can't bring the same expectations of certain teams, because I work with girls that are going to play in college. Mm-hmm. And like I was just coaching a bunch of 6th, 7th, and 8th graders that are learning how to play, period, right? And to me, I try to get all my players, regardless of what their level is, if they can find their mental and physical best individually, right? Mm-hmm. Regardless, if they're regional level team that's playing, they're paying half as much, doesn't mean we can't have fun, but you can have fun and still give your physical and mental best effort with everything you do, right? Yep. And certainly for my kids that want to play in college, like every time you go on the court, you have to do that, because if you're not, someone around the country that wants that same spot that you do is going to do so. So I agree that like when it comes to certain expectations, like I know there are kids that are of a certain proficiency, like, okay, this kid is going to take more than this practice to get this skill to where it needs to get. So I'm not going to crack on them in a way that's just going to make them feel worse about themselves, right? Versus someone that, might be, I got a couple girls that are a couple weeks away from entering their freshman season of college ball. And, I'm pushing them now because I want, when they step foot into preseason, for me to have pushed them in a way that maybe some of those teammates of theirs that they're fighting to get, travel spots, have the ability, maybe they're experiencing that push for the first time at college. And I've given them that prep work because I've coached Division III, Division I JUCO, and I know what they're going to be put into. Right. So while I agree that you might have to take a different tone, when you say that it might change from team to team, do you feel that some of these core values, some of these mission statements, like, do those fluctuate team to team, or is just kind of your delivery of each change?
Core values and mission statement do not change for me, no matter what the team looks like. They're still going to work hard at all times for themselves and for each other, but success might look different for each team. Like every year, I get middles who are brand new middles. I don't think I've ever gotten a middle who was like, I've been playing middle for 3 years. It's just never happened. This year especially, both my middles played 1 year, and it was like baby deer. But fortunately, I love working with middles, so I have to give them a lot of focus, and I have to kind of have different conversations. And I might send them videos like, hey, check out this middle blocker for Wisconsin. See how she presses, whatever it is. Like, you can do that too. This is what it can look like for you. But my core value, my mission never changes. It's just it's really more of my expectations and goals that I set for each team. It's kind of defined. And also the personalities are so different, and how I communicate with each team is different. Like this year, they came in day one. They were best friends already. I've never seen anything like it. I've never seen 11 girls just come in there, every single one of them already best friends. They said that the next practice, the group chat was just blowing up, hundreds of messages in the first week. I'm like, what? I've never seen that before. But then like last year, you got a lot of introverts over here. They kind of hang out together, but they have that one extrovert friend. Then you got this group over here. It's not really cliquey. It's just they're comfortable with who they're comfortable with, but very different personalities, very different drive. But the mission statement's the same. Core values are the same. Just the conversations sound a little bit different, probably.
You've given me a lot of really good ideas. This is my 5th year coaching at the school that I'm at. So I've had the opportunity to kind of develop and build the culture of the team. And I've seen it evolve throughout each year and get better and better. One of the things that I've struggled with is just getting the girls to get out of their own head and kind of helping themselves and finding ways to have better conversations to help them play better when those situations happen. And so I really liked your example of the beat analogy, get out of that negative mindset and focus on the questions about like having fun, have them focus on what good is actually happening out there rather than them focus on, oh my gosh, I just hit this terrible mistake. I typically say like, nobody's going to remember that tomorrow, like that's one of thousands of hits tonight. But I've gotten a lot of good information that I'll find a way to wedge into my plan somehow.
That's great. Yeah. Mental toughness is definitely one of the more difficult things to coach, no matter, it really is an all season conversation. And there have been some practices where let's sit down in a circle and let's talk through this, because there's some big issues going on here that we need to figure out how to get past. And I need to know how I can help you. Sometimes it's just an individual conversation. Like I remember it was one of my first years coaching. It might've been my second year coaching club. There's this young lady I had, I think she was playing right side at the time. Now she's a setter, but she's playing right side. And she was so negative on herself, but she had a lot of skills. She just didn't realize. I simply said, I believe in you. You just have to believe in yourself now. And like something clicked in her brain. It's just a simple statement. Like, it was genuine for me, but like I said that, and she and her parents still remember that to this day. That was like 4 years ago, I think. Like they mentioned it to me kind of recently, and I was like, wow. But like everyone's just different the way they process it. I had one player 2 years ago. She's one of the players. It doesn't matter if you say something criticizing her or praising her. She did not care. Leave me alone. I'm focused. I don't need anyone else to tell me. And that's like, okay, cool, I guess. But she was fine. It worked for her. She didn't care for feedback. She's like, I know what I did wrong. I'm good. I was like, okay. But you don't usually get players like that. You usually get players who start crying because they hit the ball into the net 3 times in a row, and you have to pull them out during the championship match, and they're one of your key outsides, things like that. But mental toughness is a season-long conversation for sure. And coaches, we need to be intentional about it, because we don't always think about it until something happens. So kind of just having these ongoing conversations, and team captains can help a lot with that too. They hear things, they see things that coaches might not be able to see. I tell my captains all the time, you're on the court during a match. I'm not. I can't hear what's going on. I can see what I think is going on, but y'all hear and see everything. So y'all need to relay things to me if something's going on. But yeah, as Brian said earlier, we control the controllables, your behavior, effort, your attitude, your thoughts, things like that.
I think one of the biggest challenges running young programs is, I was coaching a kid today and just giving them a reminder that, while it's sand, our gold medalist just hit the peak of her career at the age of 39. And I think something that's really difficult, and I think sometimes we as coaches can create a better culture of, is like, none of us are if you're coaching 18 or under, we are coaching in a developmental phase of these girls' careers. And I understand that a lot of them may not play beyond high school, but the idea that any of these kids, like, they should be making mistakes. The ones that are polished at 13, 14, 15, and they exist, but they are completely the odd ones, right? And I think we come from a culture where, I know a lot of the big clubs in our area, they show the success of their pinnacle of their athletes. And a lot of players don't recognize that, that is a small percentage of that program. That's not the norm for that program. I would argue that some of their lower teams get some of the worst instruction sometimes and some of the worst experiences. And when that happens, like, I think so many parents and players, they tie everything to playing time and victories, because they don't have people in place that can give them validation and recognize when a kid who may not win a single tournament. I coached a 15-7s team one year. I took over because halfway through the season, their coach didn't work out because we didn't give them a good coach. And those girls didn't win a single tournament, but we went from I picked them up in February, and they didn't know anything about perimeter defense. Like we scrimmaged our 8s team and lost, and I was like, oh man, these girls in 3 months, this coach taught them nothing about system. Within 3 months, those girls were going about 500 with our 3s team that was a national program, right? I think one of the challenges, and especially for, if you're coaching junior high, is like getting the parents and players to buy in. It doesn't mean that we don't want to win games, of course, but if anything, I think to use games as a measuring stick, right? So maybe you have a week or two of practice as you play your first match, and you use that instead of, I see so many kids that feel like if we win, we're great. If we lose, we suck. And a lot of these losses, especially early in their career, give us as coaches the opportunity to understand exactly what we need to work on. So, the more you can create a culture of, at the end of the day, if I can get my kids to give their physical and mental best effort every single play, there's nothing you can do that's going to give them a better chance of being successful, right? And by allowing them to make that the bar of their success, and again, if there are things they could be doing differently, that's our job to work on that at practice. But I've found as I've gotten a little bit more towards the second half of my coaching career, the more that we truly create a culture where we as coaches create it and actually reinforce, like we're not, it's hard when sometimes I see coaches say the right things and then they're chewing the kid out when they make a mistake. It's like, well, you just contradicted what you're asking them to buy. And then you wonder why they're panicking in pressure time situations. Right. So I just think the more that you can truly, I liked earlier, Stuart, how you talked about like when a kid made the right mistake and how you kind of positively reinforce that. I think so many 6th through 8th graders in our region, the biggest challenge they have is just knowing that it's okay to make mistakes, because the more they're trying to make the play more than they're trying to not screw up. For 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, that's what I think unlocks the hustle and the aggressiveness it takes to make up for some of the mechanical development that still needs to be happening. So I think you got a really tough job in junior high, and I wish you luck. And I think the more you can kind of your culture truly makes it about the process over the results. I think that in a weird way makes the results better.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Very often I tell my players that I'm proud of them, whether they won or lost, whether, we had a good practice, a tough practice, that I'm proud of you. You're coming out here, you're putting yourself out there, you're making mistakes. It's not easy to make mistakes in front of dozens of people, with your friends watching, your family watching. It can be tough. I get that, but I'm proud of you. You put a lot of effort into this, and it's paying off. You may not see it today, but you're going to look back at the end of the season and you're going to be blown away at how far you've come. Just giving them just encouragement, reassuring, things like that, for sure. And also in the book I'm writing, I do have a whole section on how to define winning. And there are different ways to define winning, because it's not just defining it. You can define it by your win percentage. You can define it by the number of championships you won, but you can also define it by going back to your coaching philosophy. For example, with my coaching philosophy, it's developing athletes for the next level. It's mistakes are part of the growing process. I can look back, am I winning as a coach when my players are growing through mistakes? Things like that. Because let's be real, when we look at winning percentage, half the teams are losing. Half the teams lose. And even I was looking at the AES system, the top 25% of teams based on win percentage only have a 64% win percentage. So the top 25% of teams have still only won 64% of their matches, which is good, but that's really close to 50% too. So they're winning, but it's not like they're winning 78%, 80% of their matches. Even the top 10%, it's the top 10% of teams have a win percentage of about 72%. So
yeah, I'll even go a step further in our sport, right? Like April Ross, I just keep using this example, but I was talking to a player about it because she was getting really discouraged after plays that she wasn't winning. So this is a player on the World Pro Tour leading up to her gold medal. She scored 336 points for and 303 against. Like, we go to 21 in a lot of beach games. 21-14 sounds like a pretty convincing win. Well, the losing team still scores 2 out of 5 times in that situation. So I think it's very important, like at the higher levels, it's not that you're winning that many points. It's that I think you get to a point where as the match goes on, you're actually assessing how the other team's scoring their points, how you're scoring yours, and literally in the middle of the match, adapting your strategy based off of that. And I see so often at the younger ages, like, every time we get a point, I see a coach sometimes getting, chewing their team out if they're not getting the point. And then when they do, it's like celebration. And I think sometimes we have to recognize, like, sometimes the other team is absolutely going to do their job and earn the point. And it's important, like you kind of said about not getting hung up on the mistakes. I like the term, forget the mistake, remember the lesson. And the more you can kind of tell your players that it's not always about winning the point. It's about, can you get data from that lost point? It's not just I'm passing and everything's catching me high, so I got to start deeper, right? Or everything I'm passing is I'm lunging in front of myself because I'm not getting close enough. I got to kind of get underneath it. Like there's never a rep that I look at a player and I'm like, that was just bad. It's their spacing was off. It was their timing was off, or a mechanical thing we can adjust. And the more you can kind of get the players to focus more on what led to not getting the point versus, the fact that it didn't happen, I think that's how you avoid letting a bad play turn into a bad match. So,
yeah.